strange in X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I know Fallfest have been more active of late.
Yeah, the last few days, well, as of recording this episode, over the last week, let's say, they've been posting up their schedules for the convention, which is exciting to live vicariously through everyone else.
Yeah, it'd be nice to go along, but then we're on holiday the same week, so we wouldn't be able to anyway.
True. But it is exciting. It sounds like there's some fun panels on there. I'd really like to go to the Lone Gunman panel, I think, myself.
Oh yeah, and I am a bit miffed that you don't have Deep Throat and William E. Davis on the same panel. I mean, surely that would have been a great thing to have.
No, I think the informants are together more.
Yeah, and William E. Davis has his own one.
Yeah.
Who we spotted yesterday, quite to our surprise, in Death Note.
The Netflix version.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, just a fleeting cameo, but I wasn't expecting that.
No, I don't think that came up when we did his guest star things ages ago either.
Yeah, it's always fun when you see an X-Files actor in the wild.
Yeah, sometimes concerning. Well, in other news of the whole paranormal variety, because I've been making note of these since you said you liked the last one.
Yeah, go on.
Is apparently the Loch Ness Monster enthusiasts are gearing up for their biggest search in 50 years.
Oh.
So basically, they are going to do a 2-day survey of the entire lake, the largest survey of Loch Ness, to try and catch the monster, as you might imagine. Aside from all the famous and sort of semi-famous sightings, there's two incidents which kind of go one way or the other. In 1987, Operation Deep Scan deployed a sonar equipment across the width of the lake and claimed to have found an unidentified object of unusual size and strength.
Oh.
In 2018, an international team of researchers from the Universities of Otago, Copenhagen, Hull and the Highlands did a DNA survey of the loch looking for unusual species and ruled out the presence of any large animals likely to be behind reports of a monster.
Ah, they suck.
They do. But they're doing a big 2-day survey, so watch this space for what comes of that one, I suppose.
I'm going to laugh at you if they pull up a plesiosaur from that lake now.
Well, obviously.
Oh, the laughter.
I mean, some of the Star Trek novelizations certainly took it that there was a plesiosaur in there.
Ah.
So they went with it, and other people have argued one way or the other.
I want to believe.
Don't we all? How's Twitch going for you?
Oh, Mortal Shell is difficult. As we mentioned last week, I've been twitching for a couple of weeks now. I did Bendy and the Dark Revival. I finished that one last week. That was fun. And I moved on to playing a Souls-like game to broadcast my trauma, called Mortal Shell. Feel free to come and join me on the Twitch, just to keep my spirits up as I die over and over again. Or more welcome would be, if you played the game before, to just guide me through it, because I get very lost.
There's a limit to how much you can guide through. Well, you're in the nutting now. It's more or less straightforward. It's just the big swamp that's hard to navigate, I found.
Yeah, the swamp was awful. Twitch.tv/dire not dire. That's dire, DYER, not DIRE. Same as my Twitter handle if you'd like to come and witness my misery. It's every Monday and Wednesday at 9 PM British summertime.
You do know your username is actually one of the ones that will trip people over, because when you say dire, not DYER, not DIRE, they're going to think it's just the one word.
That's very true. It's two words. Dire, like the surname, not DIRE.
Like the wolf.
Like the wolf, yep.
Yeah.
Or boring.
Oh, boring, yeah. None of which actually include today's episodes, though I know people aren't fond of one of them. But we'll jump into Mundo Gira. Directed by Tucker Gates, written by John Shaban. Hi, John. Broadcast on the 12th of January 1997. Guest stars: Ruben Blades plays Conrad Lozano, who we've seen in one other thing, and one thing we haven't watched but should get around to at some point. So he's in Predator 2.
Okay.
He's also in Once Upon a Time in Mexico, the third part of the Desperado El Mariachi.
Oh, after
trilogy.
Desperado.
Yeah. But the bigger guest star, and the one who's done loads of stuff and is very well known in current pop culture, would be Raymond Cruz as Eladio Puente, who was in Gremlins 2 of all things.
Was he?
He's the messenger who says, "Is that Sting?" when he's trying to sing the song. He was in Under Siege. He's in The Rock. He was in Broken Arrow. Kind of seeing a trend there.
Mm-hmm.
First time I remember seeing him was Alien Resurrection. where he plays the guy who almost survives and dies at like the night.
He's like the kind of guardy, soldiery guy, isn't he?
He is. I think he's just a soldier or something. He's in From Dusk Till Dawn 2. He's in The Curse of La Llorona from The Conjuring.
Oh, yeah.
He was in an episode of Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
Hilariously, at least I find it hilarious, he was in Harsh Realm, which is Chris Carter's other series.
Okay.
I didn't actually know this before because I knew it failed, but I then went and looked it up just now. It managed 3 of 9 episodes before cancellation.
Okay.
They made 9 episodes, they broadcast 3 and cancelled it. Only 3 made it to air.
That's not comforting.
That's not good at all. But the thing people know him for, of late, is he is in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
Okay.
Where he is a drug dealer and quite a violent one as well.
All right.
Elsewhere, we have Lillian Hurst as Flaquita, who was in Candyman 3, Farewell to the Flesh.
Okay.
She was also in Arrested Development.
Was she?
As Luz.
Oh, was she?
Yeah.
Ah.
And the fun one. I know the other ones have been fun, but Michael Kopser played Rick Culver. I'm not entirely sure who he was. He might be the day hirer guy. But he does lots of dub work. I love finding these actors who just dub people.
Okay, what's he done?
Mobile Suit Gundam and Mobile Suit Gundam 00.
Okay.
Inuyasha. Not Inuyasha, but he's a character I didn't recognise. But the good one. Death Note as Takeshi Ui, who I don't remember who that is.
I think he's from slightly later on in Death Note. Yeah, one of the businessmen.
Okay. Yeah, never mind.
But yeah.
He was in the film version of Watchmen.
Okay.
He was in Apollo 18.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that one.
Okay, so El Mundo Gira. Mulder and Scully investigate the death of Maria Durantes, an illegal immigrant from Mexico living in San Joaquin Valley near Fresno, California. She was found dead with her face partially eaten away after yellow rain fell from the sky. Maria was entangled between 2 brothers, Eladio and Soledad Puente. Soledad blames his brother for her death, given that he survived while Maria died. The migrants believed that the so-called chupacabra was responsible for her death, despite the fact that none of the circumstances of the death resemble anything close to reports of the chupacabra. Mulder, assisted on the case by Mexican-American INS agent Conrad Lozano, is able to track down and interrogate Eladio, who frightens the other migrants. Meanwhile, Scully discovers that Maria was killed by a fungal growth known as aspergillus. While Eladio is being deported to Mexico, he manages to escape and kills the truck driver in the process. A clinical exam on the driver shows his death was caused by rapid growth of athlete's foot. Scully brings the samples of the fatal fungi to a mycologist who discovers that their abnormal growth was caused by an unidentified enzyme. The revelation leads Scully to suspect Eladio of being an unwitting carrier of the enzyme, necessitating his immediate capture. Eladio meets with his cousin Gabrielle seeking to return to Mexico and asks her for money. He works as a day worker for a construction foreman to make the money. Soledad comes after him, seeking to kill him, but instead finds the foreman dead, of the same fungal growth. Eladio escapes in the foreman's truck and heads to a grocery store where Gabrielle works, and continues to spread the fungal growth. The agents later confront Soledad at the supermarket and discover another victim of the growth where Eladio had been standing. Eladio returns to Gabrielle, but by now has grown deformed from the fungus. Gabrielle gives him her money and lies to the agents about his location when they come to see her. Eladio has returned to the camp where Maria died, and Lorenzo brings Soledad there to try to convince him to kill his brother. Soledad finds he can't do it, and Lozano struggles with him, accidentally killed when the gun goes off. Soledad and Eladio flee into the night, and both become carriers of the fungal growth, and flee towards Mexico and into obscurity. So, we know fandom as a whole don't like this episode.
No, the general consensus of this episode, even at the time, was that it's kind of bad to middling at best.
It's a John Shaban special. I don't think I minded it the first time around, and watching it again, it drags, but you can kind of see what they're getting at. One weird thing I realised this time round is, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but there's a kind of Jose Chung air to it. Because we've got the same incident seen different ways with very different spins on it.
It's particularly at the end of the episode, you kind of get into that Rashomon structure again.
Yeah, and it's the whole, the mother sees aliens cresting the brow of the hill in the bright light, and then we cut to it's a hazmat team coming in. And that makes a lot more sense. One thing I don't think that the episode kind of skips out on, and you feel they should have possibly done more with it, is the chupacabra as depicted in this episode, and kind of in real life, but more this episode, because I think you looked up the real world look of the chupacabra, and it's not as close. But the graffiti in this episode is a grey alien.
El Chupacabra kind of looks different in different reports because it's basically an urban legend rather than a cryptid. It's a rather modern thing. And I think it originated, I want to say Puerto Rico rather than Mexico.
Okay.
But it's kind of always associated with these kind of Latinx communities. But El Chupacabra is usually a kind of quadrupedal animal. It's usually small and grey, and people depict it either as being reptilian or kind of dog-like. So you often see there's a very famous sketch of it where it's kind of got spikes down its back and a rather flat face with big black eyes, which I think is what we're getting at in this one.
Yeah, but the graffiti that you see of it is...
It's very much a grey alien, yeah. And also, specifically, the kind of attack on Maria isn't very Chupacabra-like. And also, you see a goat get maimed at the start of the episode too, because Chupacabra literally means goat sucker.
Yeah.
Because it was a creature that was supposed to prey on livestock. So it seems a bit odd that we'd immediately step to, yes, El Chupacabra has kind of killed this woman.
Yeah, and also suddenly jumping to Eladio is the Chupacabra.
Mm.
It was a bit of an odd thing. The other thing I don't get really is why everyone else is afraid of him. Because for that information to have passed that widely through people, and the fact that people just look at him on sight and say, "Oh, it's Chupacabra," is based on what? Most of the time he looks like a normal person.
And they don't know that he's spreading this fungus, at least not at first either.
And not even a fungus, he's spreading an accelerant.
I'm thinking more... I want to get on that and the way that the Doctor describes enzymes in this, actually.
Well, yeah.
Given the fact that he does a big deal of the enzyme is acting like a catalyst. Yes, that's what an enzyme is.
It's a fast catalyst. Yeah, we could put the science not on John Shaban's
But there we are. But still, it's if there had been some reports about his touch being fatal, but they're kind of freaking out like that even when he's in the lockup. No one will be in the same cell as him.
Yeah, no one wants to get in the truck with him, and that then them crashing.
I guess you've got the idea of gossip travelling fast in small communities, but gossip travelling fast when what he's done is outside of the lockup and these people have been incarcerated.
Yeah, there's an implausibility to it, and it's a supernatural edge to it, which I can kind of see them getting at, but then you are at risk of the whole, you're giving a minority ethnic group a kind of magical sense again, and all that stuff you're not meant to do.
Yeah, that sits bad at me. Apparently, John Shaban actually visited INS camps so he could get a kind of good feel about what it was like. So I'll give that he's given this more research than I think previous writers have.
Yeah.
But it's still got that feel, not quite as severely, but the same kind of idea that we had in Hell Money.
Yeah.
Where you've got the idea of it's a white guy kind of writing about an ethnic minority and kind of making them seem a bit backwards and superstitious.
Yeah. And just the weird explanation, oh yes, that's just what they do. From Lozano.
Well, and the idea of their boring lives, so they've got to make a story. The idea that the kind of Mexican people here have turned this into a telenovela.
Yeah. But I think the problem with that is it kind of already is a telenovela, and then we add, basically, we've got a telenovela, one woman with two potential lovers. Well, one lover and one maybe lover. And into that, we're turning it into Dark Shadows with whatever the hell happened.
Yeah.
Which... I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. We have no idea ultimately what that was. I mean, Mulder was convinced it's from space. At the same time, this feels like a government job. This is exactly what the government would do in the X-Files.
Yeah, Mulder's idea is kind of a bit like black ice falling from space sort of idea. It's something that's been carried down on some debris and dispersed in the atmosphere.
And not a plane dropping things or chemicals onto a migrant camp to see what happened.
Yeah, I think that would be I don't want to say a more logical explanation, but a more satisfactory one, maybe.
It ties together a lot better with the rest of the X-Files.
Well, especially with what we've seen in episodes like Blood.
Yeah.
And, the other mind control one.
Oh, Wet Wired.
Wet Wired, yeah.
So, yeah, you can totally buy this. Yeah, what I can't buy is that this camp is in California, because that is the greenest, wettest, most grey California I've ever seen in my life.
I've got a fun fact for you.
Go on then.
Filming was delayed by a day because of heavy snowfall. 8 inches of snow fell on the site and they had to go out with hairdryers to melt it all because they were supposed to be presenting it as a kind of arid desert valley.
And it did, no. I mean, I do have sympathy for part of, you're filming Vancouver for whatever reason. You are stuck with the local weather conditions.
It's in the same way that Vancouver really didn't look like Argentina in Tesos Despichos.
Yeah, but this is one of those, this is nearly equatorial. This should not look like that. But yeah, the lack of actual what was going on is interesting or semi-frustrating. The other problem with it, I think, then, is we've got this idea of Eladio being a carrier for the enzyme. Which I'm going to go on a limb and say, what are you doing? Because that's weird on top of everything else.
He's like a typhoid Mary, but it's an enzyme, not a disease.
Yeah, he's not actually, it's not infecting him and not presenting symptoms, which is how that normally works. We've got to factor in that, and the fact that this is just an enzyme that only works on fungus, from what we can tell, and just completely makes it overreact, which we're going to get to in a minute. But yeah, he's carrying that, but it's also mutating him. So he's not actually a typhoid Mary at all if he's showing weird symptoms that no one else has.
That's true. The only thing it doesn't seem to be doing is killing him.
Yeah, and then it's making him look a bit vaguely like the chupacabra.
Or rather, more so vaguely like a grey alien.
Well, yeah, and that's ultimately what we're getting to with our grey aliens at the end.
I do have a problem, because our rather underhanded kind of moral of the episode is that nobody looks at minorities.
Yeah.
So the idea is that the white populace of America is so uncaring that they will just overlook and just physically cannot see these Mexican immigrants.
Yeah.
Which I can see where we're getting at, that's truth. We don't lean into it as heavily as we should, which I think, again, is the problem of a white writer.
Yeah.
And I want to cite the recent Blue Beetle movie of How You Do This Correctly.
Yeah.
As
that was
well.
Much better.
Which was, I believe, written by a Mexican person as
And
well.
directed as well.
And directed, and with a Mexican cast.
Yes.
So, there we go. That's what you need. But the belief is that, these people are invisible, we're not looking at them. If we buy into that, these invisible people we know are carrying a deadly enzyme that can kill in seconds. I think the government would look at this.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want this unknown commodity just roaming around.
Just rolling free and hitchhiking by the side of the road, going to Mexico. It's kind of the whole, you could have this be the last episode of the X-Files season. If the X-Files was cancelled after Mundo Gira, fandom would have to grasp up with the fact that by implication, these two have spread this fungal enzyme across the entire world and killed most of the population. That would have been a weird end for the X-Files, ultimately. But yeah, the lack of resolution is really frustrating with the two. They're just wandering free and no one really sees them. Like, yeah, but you and Scully are kind of counter to that because you talk to these people, and Lozano might be uncaring, but he does recognize people and can talk to them. One of the weirder points I want to bring up in this episode, and I'm sure to American audiences this is absolutely unfathomable comment. Eric Estrada, when Eladio passes him off as Eric Estrada. I know Eric Estrada for one thing and one thing only.
Is it C-Lab?
It's C-Lab 2021. And I'm sure to some people that it's got to be a more common name than that, because I refuse to believe that's where Agent Mulder knows it from. He must have more of a career.
He's had a very big career, yeah. Eric Estrada. That'll be where we're getting at it from.
Yeah, but it's the whole, I only know for one thing. I probably seen other things with him in, just don't know it's him. But I always get hung up when he says, Eric Estrada, because I always wonder, is Eric Estrada in the cast somewhere? Is he also just in the monster?
Apparently, that was played for laughs in this, with them all taking absolutely ridiculous pseudonyms on. But that was one of John Shaban's observance in the INS camp, is that nobody gives their real name. So he played it up for comedy in this episode by them all giving ridiculous celebrity names.
Which is fair. I don't think I caught any of the other ones, it's just that one.
There was a big list of them at the start.
There was, but I didn't. None of the other ones rang out as familiar at all. There's no Ricardo Montalban, for example.
Telenovela structure is something that we're not greatly familiar with in the UK as well, I must admit. We don't really have teledramas like that.
No, but I would say I have a passing familiarity thanks to Jane the Virgin, the TV series.
Okay.
Which, one of the characters on that, her father, is a big telenovela star. So you get glimpses of these just insane plot lines that are going off, and the sharp direction changes when that sort of mid-season twist happens or something.
Oh, during COVID, I found a YouTube channel, and I apologize, I cannot remember the name for the life of me, but she was reviewing these old telenovelas, and they do sound surreal and bizarre.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that's probably the weakest part of this episode, is that as telenovelas go, this isn't actually insane enough. This is actually really mundane for a telenovela.
You need more comas and more people crippling their loved ones and their loved ones secretly hatching a revenge plot behind the scenes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you also need a love septahedron or something.
Yeah.
A love triangle is just too mundane.
There's always the wedding's about to happen, and then the love from 2 years ago who had the mysterious cliff diving accident returns and all the rest of it.
Exactly. And so it's sort of, yeah, you saying it's like a telenovela just shows that you don't watch telenovelas or have much of understanding how they work.
I also think it just packs too much into this plot as well. You don't really need the telenovela trappings in there.
No, I mean, the actual, the love triangle thing does feel kind of immaterial, because if you remove the flirting at the start, if he's with Maria when she dies, that's all you need.
But also the fact that she barely interacts with Soledad. I think there's like a little hug they have at the start, and that's the only time you see Maria and Soledad together.
And she exchanges more words with Eladio, yeah. But yeah, I mean, but you don't need to have Eladio flirt with her. He can simply be her friend and run across the hill to help her with the goats when the flash happened. I mean, it would also be nice to know why he's okay, other than the Typhoid Mary thing, but...
It also feels very similar, the episode is. It's got a lot of structure and kind of plot similarities with Emasculata.
Yes.
We've just put a kind of comedic edge on that.
Yeah. But none of the whole lockdown or the careful precautions, which I know feeds back into the whole, the Mexicans, no one cares.
Yeah, but that's what leads into my point, is the fact that you had so many kind of units chasing this guy down in Emasculata.
Yeah.
Because he was a carrier and he was dangerous. But we don't get any of that in El Mundo Gira.
Yeah. So I think the other point I was going to make just briefly there was, I don't understand why Soledad suddenly succumbs at the end.
I'm just assuming it's on the basis of, because he's Hilario's brother, they've got a kind of similar immunity.
Oh yeah, but it's still, you kind of would imagine that he'd sort of show symptoms earlier as well, sort of go on the same path, not just suddenly we're cut to sometime later when they're hitchhiking and they both look like the chupacabra. But, I mean, I take your point of there's too much in it and the difference between Emasculata, which strikes me that it'd be very difficult to do the same plot, but you want lower stakes for this to work. If Emasculata shows your approach to biohazards at critical infectious level and devastating, which this is in the examples we've seen of it, because it's killed off, we know, at least 3 people with barely hindrance to it. And we don't know what the infection rates are like and what makes you immune to it. But if the stakes weren't that high, like if it was putting people into comas or something rather than killing them outright, then that level of encountering might be okay. Or it was a weirdly ethnic focused virus, so it was only infecting Mexicans. If you put that kind of spin on it, then sure, the uncaring thing would work properly. But I think all the victims are white. Except for Maria. Because the foreman of the construction site's white. That guy in the convenience store is white. I think the driver of the INS truck might have been white.
At the end, you see Lozano, after he's shot, is affected by it.
Yeah.
He's not white.
He's not white. It's okay, but most of the victims then have been white. So we're doing that thing where we're trying to fix it again, but come on, John. This wasn't that hard. I don't suppose you have the trivia of if this started out as a bizarre other thing and morphed into this.
Actually, not so much in this one. My trivia for the genesis of this one is it was the twin things that inspired it was John Shiban remembering as a child when you were driving through Canada, you saw Mexican strawberry pickers in the fields and nobody really batted an eye looking at them. The idea of the invisible person. Added to him reading a story in a kind of journal about the chupacabra and kind of connecting the two. But it had a couple of workings with the different infected person because originally it didn't have the telenovela trappings to it. So I think one of the early ideas was a child was going to be the carrier of it. But then he got into the idea of two men, one woman trouble, or whatever the tagline is.
Yeah, which even Scully says. But yeah, as we've sort of said, I think that's actually to its detriment, that kind of complication. We didn't actually need that on top of everything else. It's one of these as you said, it's meant to cast light on the plight of a real world peoples. On the other hand, also faintly comedic, kind of trivializing it, and then we're throwing outer space enzymes into the mix and confusion between aliens and hazmat.
Yeah, I do think you don't have to make your focus the plight of Mexican immigrants or something like that, but you do have to treat it with more care than this episode has.
Yeah, and if you wanted to do a telenovela for whatever reason you want to do a telenovela, you actually have to push it harder than this. This is too limp, as I said before.
I think that's something you can't do in a single episode of a series, though, as well.
No, but then it comes back to the whole, you probably shouldn't try this then, because you can't. Telenovela is a cumulative effect, like all soap operas is. The earlier you start, the bigger the payoffs when they happen. And this is, you have 45 minutes to do this and you don't have the time.
Apparently even the title feeds into the telenovela-ness of it, because El Mundo Gira, I'm not sure how you even pronounce Gira, actually. I've been saying Gira, might be Gira. El Mundo Gira, anyway, in Spanish means the world turns, and a long-running American soap opera is apparently called As the World Turns.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's got its titling in there, to get that from page 1.
Do we have anything else on El Mundo Gira?
No, it's surprising El Mundo Gira, because I thought we'd have a lot more to say about it, but it's such a shallow plot when you kind of remove that trapping of the telenovela.
Yeah, there's not much to it, and it's kind of, I think the weirdest part about it is the fact that they have Eladio in custody by, like, the first ad break.
Yeah.
And then they lose him for, like, the most vague and strange reasons. I mean, it's really odd, though, that basically the driver dies and you see the other people fleeing the truck and Eladio is nowhere in sight already. And it's really odd they lose him so fast after having
It even says they round up virtually everyone except Eladio.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that feels really odd. I mean, this is the kind of thing where you could actually make a case for Mulder and Scully can never meet this person because they're that dangerous. You cannot actually let them be in the same place at the same time. But we're not doing that.
We've criticised that this episode didn't quite go far enough. The times it almost touched on it, I thought were the best bits of the episode, is any bit where you actually did show the negative plight of these kind of immigrants, many of whom are illegal.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of points. There's one with, right at the start when Scully goes to examine Maria's corpse, is you have this really, really uncaring white mortician there, who she's really blunt, and she just refers to the bodies as Juans and Juanitas and has no idea who they actually are and things like that.
It's just in the fridge.
Yeah, it's just in the fridge, and she won't even help Scully look at it until Scully demands it of her.
Yeah.
Another was just a throwaway comment that I think Lozano makes about Ilario's plight is that he's going to get his 45 seconds in front of the judge and then they'll just deport him.
Yeah.
There's no caring, there's no sense that they're listening to these people's stories or anything like that. It's just the whole, right, we've got to give them some time in front of a judge, but they're just going to be deported immediately anyway.
Yeah, it's the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law, as usual.
Yeah. Those are the points that I felt we were actually starting to touch on, the kind of message behind this about people being invisible, but we just didn't go as far as we needed to.
No. You have maybe realised the other thing that ultimately is confusing. So, Ladio is with Maria when she dies.
Yeah.
Then he is not clear, he's either hounded out or flees the camp.
Yeah.
INS pick him up.
Yep.
He then crashes and he tells the barber that he wants to go back to Mexico.
Yeah.
He goes to Gabrielle for money.
Yep.
Mulder, Scully, and Lozano don't believe he actually wants to go to Mexico for some reason. And it turns out he goes back to the migrant camp, then has the confrontation with Soledad and Lozano, and Lozano dies, and then, got the synopsis at least, because the episode sure as hell doesn't make it clear, they're going on to Mexico.
It's unclear based on people's stories because Gabriella talks about giving them the money, and some of the other plot lines I think infer that she doesn't.
Yeah.
Or that he bullied the money out of her or something like that.
Yeah, so, but ultimately, what Eladio was doing, I don't know anymore. That's very confused, ultimately.
I think the real problem is the Rashomon structure of the ending, as well as the fact that you've got these, like, 3 alternatives and each one of them might contain a kernel of the truth.
Yeah, and again, this is the whole, my point about the Jose Chung radar at the start is, if you'd lent into that a bit more and kind of borrowed more of the Jose Chung structure, you might have got something more interesting. Because it just feels really odd to have everything is basically agreed upon until you get to that last scene. Because I think we needed more. Basically, we need to do this all post hoc. So, like, Mulder and Scully sit down with Gabrielle, they sit down with the mother, and possibly Lozano, and get their different accounts or something. I think is how you could have done it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that we only went down the Rashomon route at the very end as well. Because, the entirety of Jose Chung, the plot's in flux. You have those threads from the start. Whereas in this one, it's because we kind of witness the start is we know about the big flash and the sonic boom and the yellow rain because we've seen it. It's not just the crazy old lady telling her story.
Exactly. And given Rashomon itself, there's no reason why you can't use the structure to do a serious story as much as you can use to do a comedy story. It works perfectly fine both ways.
Well, Rashomon's kind of darkly comedic itself.
It's darkly comedic, but it's more heavy on the dark than the comedy, though.
It's a lot straighter story than, like, Jose Chung is.
I mean, the most humorous part of Rashomon is really the fact they get the spirit of the dead samurai back, who then contradicts everyone. That's the funniest moment, I thought.
Oh, the ridiculous wrap-up in Rashomon where it turns out that none of them's telling the right story because they're all so embarrassed by it.
Yeah. But that's more serious than Jose Chung used it for. But there's no reason why you couldn't have done it. I mean, if you'd done it as a series of interviews with survivors post after the fact, you again get to the whole Mulder and Scully should not be in the situation. Like, Emasculata was very careful with why Mulder and Scully survived that encounter. This isn't. There's no reason why they actually get as close to Eladio as they do and come off unscathed.
There's a lot of touching samples without hazmat suits on in this episode as well. Whereas apparently touching that cashew nut was enough to kill the guy in the bodega.
Exactly. So, what on earth is going on? Anything else?
No, I really think that it's just so shallow and so basic this plot is. I don't actually have much to say.
Well, no, that's fair. I think you'll have more for this one. Next one.
Yeah, let's move on to something better.
Okay. So, the other episode we've got is Leonard Betts. Directed by Kim Manners and written by Vince Gilligan, John Shaban again, and Frank Spotnitz. First broadcast on the 26th of Jan, 1987. Only one guest star of note, and this is one of these things where I feel we're out of the loop.
Okay.
Weirdly. And I'll get to why. I'll save it to last. The big thing that this guy did.
Okay.
So, the only guest star of note is Paul McCrane as Leonard Betts. So, he's been in, amongst other things, Rocky 2. He was in RoboCop.
Okay.
Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, really?
He's one of the guards.
Okay.
Atlas Shrugs 2.
There's an Atlas Shrugs 2?
They split into 3 films
Okay.
with increasingly less money for each one of them.
Fair enough.
Basically, it started off pretty high budget and then they just crash into a Kickstarter towards the end.
Right.
But what he's most famous for is Fame, the musical.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a whole song and things. He got nominated for awards for this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, is he? Okay. I've never seen the film, so I have no idea who this guy is. But yeah.
How random.
Leonard Betts is in Fame. Would you like to give us a synopsis for Leonard Betts?
Sure thing. Our story this time takes place in Pittsburgh, where we start off in the back of an ambulance where an EMT paramedic called Leonard Betts is in the process of trying to help a flatlining patient, while his partner Michelle Wilkes drives. Leonard impressively manages to diagnose the patient's lung cancer at a glance, which distracts Michelle Wilkes and she crashes the ambulance into a truck, which unfortunately leaves her badly injured but Leonard decapitated. Later at the morgue, Leonard's headless body manages to climb out of its cold storage chamber, knocks out the attendant, steals his clothes, and runs away. This is where Mulder and Scully are called in. They visit the morgue and see the evidence that Leonard has just walked out, something that Scully strongly refutes, and search for his missing head, which they eventually find in a medical waste dumpster in the basement. Scully begins a cranial examination, but the head's eyes and mouth both suddenly open as she begins to cut into it, which gives her somewhat of a fright. At the meantime, Mulder goes to Betts' apartment, where we see off camera that there is somebody inside. Mulder finds the attendant's stolen clothes discarded, and finds a bathtub filled with iodine, as well as evidence that someone has escaped through a window. However, as Mulder leaves, we see Betts, now with a regrown head, rising out of the bathtub. Mulder also interviews Michelle, who recalls that Betts has an uncanny ability to detect illness, particularly cancer. Scully, in an attempt to actually study Betts' head, has the entire thing polymerized and examines it by cutting off slices. When looking at a scan of his frontal lobe, she sees that it displays signs of pervasive cancer at such a high stage that it should have killed him long ago. Mulder turns to Chuck Burks, an associate of his who we formerly saw in the Calusari, to give the slice a Kirlian photography test, which should show auras and kind of other spectral imagery. The image that Chuck does take shows corona discharge, which takes the appearance of a human's neck and shoulders, something that Chuck says is unbelievable given the fact he was decapitated. Scully searches fingerprint records and discovers that Betts has identical fingerprints with a man called Albert Tanner. The agents visit Tanner's elderly mother, Elaine, who informs them that Albert tragically died 6 years before in a car accident, which just leads to another dead end. In the meantime, Wilkes manages to hear Betts talking over her radio, working at a different hospital now. She tracks Betts down and confronts him. However, Betts gives an apology that turns out to be more an apology that she managed to find him. He gives her a lethal injection of potassium chloride, which kills her almost instantly. However, he's spotted by a security guard who pursues and captures him. Betts is handcuffed to a car, but he manages to escape by ripping off his own thumb. When Mulder and Scully arrive and search his car, they discover that he has boxes of disposed tumours in his cooler trunk. Mulder begins to believe that Betts must need to eat the tumours, that his nature kind of makes him the embodiment, essentially, of a being that's made up of cancerous cells, and therefore he is a radical leap in our evolution and capable of unthinkable levels of regeneration. Looking into the car, they discover that it's registered to Elaine, thus proving that she's actually been lying to them and knew that Betts was alive all along. Mulder and Scully have the police search her home, and Elaine recounts how her son endured bullying as a child because he was different, offhandedly dismissing anything Betts has done, saying if he killed anybody, he had to have had his reasons. In the meantime, we see Betts accosting a bar patron, a man that's later identified as John Gilnitz, and killing him in order to tear out his cancerous lung. Later, inside a storage unit, Betts sheds his entire body to create a duplicate. When Mulder and Scully come across the storage unit, the duplicate Betts attempts to flee in a car, which explodes when fired upon, seemingly killing him. Scully suggests that Betts' first death as Albert Tanner was staged, but when they examine Tanner's casket, which they've had exhumed, they find that his body is still inside and is a dead ringer for Leonard Betts. Mulder therefore becomes absolutely convinced that it's not just body parts that Betts can regenerate, it's actually his entire body. Because of this, he believes that Betts isn't dead and is still at large somewhere. Betts heads back to Elaine's to recuperate, and at her behest, he removes a cancerous tumour from her body before calling an ambulance. Mulder and Scully, already staking out Elaine's house, are there when the paramedics arrive. Scully accompanies Elaine, who is in a very serious condition but still alive, to the hospital, as Mulder conducts a search of the neighbourhood. However, shortly after they arrive at the hospital, Scully realises that Betts has stowed himself away on the ambulance. Betts manages to lock Scully in the ambulance with himself, and calmly but very apologetically tells her that she has something he needs. Scully instantly seems to realise what this must mean. After a fight, Scully manages to kill Betts by pressing a charged defibrillator paddle against his head. Scully then remains silently stunned by the fact that Betts has his cancer, something that Mulder just ascertains to shock. However, that night in her apartment, Scully wakes up violently coughing and finds that her nose is badly bleeding, thus confirming to both her and the audience that she likely does have cancer.
Thank you. We made a note of this back in Nisai,
Of what, sorry?
cancer. Because this was Betsy Hagopen and the other MUFON members.
Interestingly, in my notes, I had it slightly different.
Okay.
Yeah, I do appreciate we did mention cancer on the whole back then and the possibility of this, but I think the first clue was Unruhe.
Yeah, that's fair, that's true.
As Jerry points at the bridge of her nose and says that she has unrest.
Ah. Both could be true, but only one leads into the conspiracy, so we'll see where that goes. While on the whole like this episode, some of it is just weird, isn't it?
It's another vampire story.
It is another vampire story. I think there's one thing that the episodes really grapple with, which is that setting aside, and it's a lot set aside, the whole person can consume cancer to keep himself alive and presumably useful. Regrowing your head is one of those things that you just don't do. I know we talked about this a lot for the alien bounty hunters with the weak spot on the back of the neck. I mean, does that mean Leonard Betts is an alien bounty hunter? Actually, he doesn't shapeshift. He does grow a second himself, which is just absolutely bizarre.
I just see a hilarious goof of this is the fact that Leonard is bald, so he can regenerate his kind of skin and teeth and fingernails, but not his hair, apparently.
And eyebrows.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. But, and it's not unfair to critique the ropey CGI. It looks terrible, though, when he sheds his whole
It's
self.
particularly that one when he's regenerating his duplicate.
Yeah.
It hasn't aged well.
But I kind of feel that, I don't know if it's like, I felt it didn't have enough time, but you've got some existential questions about that moment. Like, we're getting into a prestige level, who died and who lived in that situation. Which one of them was in the car? Because in memory, I thought it was just he jammed his discarded skin's foot on the accelerator or something.
No, he's clearly driving.
He's clearly driving, and it's a whole complete person as well, because the autopsy doesn't find out it's a shell or something. So there's that's ethical conundrum there.
Potentially how many Leonards are just roaming around the world. Has he done this before?
Yeah, and again, like the Prestige, at which point do you find out you're the person who falls in the trap and the person who sort of gets away every night thing?
Are you the trick or the prestige?
Yeah, that's probably the better way of phrasing it. And it's something that the film goes in a lot more than the book did.
Mm.
But because I think in the book, at least, his perspective was always, he never had that doubt. He was always a survivor. But the film goes in on, in the book, the Prestige is always dead, isn't it?
It dies instantly.
Yeah. In the film, you have to kill the Prestige for it to work.
Mm.
So yeah, the film was generated that whole existential conundrum there. With of course, the even worse implications are you are always a survivor and you're always the person who dies. Is unfortunately how it would be from your perspective every single time. It's just horrible.
I like that this is what you've taken away from Leonard Betts.
Just from that one bit though, but it's the whole, they don't grapple with it in the episode, and it's the whole, wow, that, if you stopped and think about it, that's really just awful what he's just done. I mean, or you could equate it to Gravity Falls. So did Leonard and Leonard have a conversation of, okay, so you get in the car and crash and they're going to shoot at you, and I'm going to wait and hide in here? Or did they have to fight it out? Or how did that work? It's one of these clone story things that you don't normally get. And no one says anything. Which I imagine is not what anyone writing this episode was thinking about.
I like that you've gone straight for your criticism, but I love this episode. This is one of my favourite ones.
I know you love this episode. It is good. I mean, it's got a dark comedy vein to it as well, like the headless corpse breaks out of.
I like Mulder's discomfort as well, if you're going to the comedy, when Scully has him rooting around in the medical waste bin.
Yes.
It's Mulder's kind of standing back and looking really uncomfortable. She says, no, you've got longer arms. And gets him in there to dredge in this.
You're wearing gloves, Mulder. It can't be that bad.
Oh yeah, would you want to stick your arm in the medical waste bin?
No, but I mean, if I had gloves on, it means you're not going to get the same kind of sensations out of it, are you?
It's not like you're squidging around in organs with your bare hands.
Yeah. That's a level of, oh my god, no. I do like that Leonard's, the radiation he gives off conveniently cuts off exactly the right point in CCTV cameras, so you can't see its headless corpse.
Mm.
Very convenient.
It's either the radiation he gives off, or the explanation the guard gives is that they're just really old cameras, but it's just got that band of static.
Either way, hell of a coincidence. It's exactly the right height to obscure this. But, I mean, it's a good setup, man decapitated in an accident, breaks out of the morgue the next day.
After you've already seen he's got kind of some sort of supernatural power, because he is just an EMT in the back and he looks at a guy and says, oh, the cancer's eaten through his left lung or something like that.
Yeah.
So you've already got this kind of air of there's something about Leonard before he even gets decapitated.
Yes, and I like the fact the episode is wrong-footing you with how it's going to work, because you think it's going to be about that diagnosis aspect, and then wham, he's dead.
Immediately kills him.
I mean,
I'm not sure how... I'm going to go on your usual criticism here of how his partner kept her job afterwards.
Yeah, I'm not sure either on that one. That was really odd.
She's presumably also killed the patient in the back, too.
Yep. I mean, I'll also then throw in, since I'm throwing out other weird references, Seinfeld, where the ambulance driver managed to crash in an episode of that when they're having an argument about candy bars.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, I remember. Yeah.
So when George is turning blue.
Yeah. In fact, in the novella, this is the last one I have that isn't a movie that has a novella as well. The novella is called Regeneration, and it's another one of Neil Schusterman's kind of pseudonym ones. Everett Royce, I think he calls himself, or something like that.
Okay.
But at the start of that opening scene is immensely more gruesome and does confirm that the person in the back was also killed in the accident.
Yeah, how she's not been fired or put on administrative leave or something. Again, apparently this is the X-Files universe, since Mulder has a job still, and I don't understand how he...
After Paper Hearts.
I do not understand why he's still employed. By the FBI, no less. Like, Mulder, you can go and set up your own conspiracy magazine. The Lone Gunman, I'm sure, will help you get started. Just go with that, it'll be fine. No, Mulder needs his inside track. I don't know, there's been a slight repetitive thing to season 4, at least I've just realised we had it in El Mundo Gira and Leonard Betts, of Scully saying, why are we even here, Mulder? Which is something that we didn't get so much in some of the other episodes, but I get a strange sensation we've had quite a bit of lately, of Mulder having to explain what the weird thing is to her. It kind of feels unnecessary at this point, because Scully should be starting from the, okay, I know what this looks like, can't be that, what's your theory, Mulder? Not this whole, why are we even here, Mulder? Come on, Scully. Been doing this for 4 years. You know how this works now.
I imagine she's drawing straws of, alright, is this going to be vampires, werewolves, Aztec fertility gods? You're Scully going through her weird things Mulder might say at this point.
Exactly. Aliens. Is it aliens? No, this isn't like aliens. No. I mean, I'd almost want Scully to come up with like some of Mulder's like props for like the alien time dilation thing. Like, just have her do that at the start. Okay, so yep, I've tried the stopwatch trick. Not aliens this time. But yeah, it's a weird repetitive thing for her to sort of say, why are we even here? It's like, he's brought you here for a reason.
You do kind of need it for the audience, though.
You do, but at the same time, you just can cut Scully's skepticism bit off a bit. Because there'll be some inexplicable reason why we're here.
Give Scully something to do.
Well, and there is more of that here. I mean, this is actually, when Leonard attacks her, it's one of the weird inversions of normal. Because Mulder sends Scully off to the hospital with Mrs. Betts, or whatever her...
Elaine.
Mrs. Lane. While he's doing the mundane work. And for a change, the excitement doesn't happen to Mulder staying in the field, it happens to Scully. As you said, it's not clear how Leonard Betts is hidden in this ambulance. I mean, he's on top of it.
According to Wikipedia, it's clinging to the top, but he very clearly isn't in those long shots.
He then slid off of it somehow and got into it to grab Scully to drag her in.
I argue this in Host is there is no way you can flip and hide in an ambulance.
No, and this isn't as bad as Host. Host was the whole, where in the hell was it? I don't understand.
It does kind of infer from the iodine on the roof that he is on the roof, but you see the ambulance pulling away and he's not on it.
Yeah.
So I have no idea where Leonard, but you've got to buy he's stowed away on this ambulance somehow.
Yeah. And grab Scully for the express purposes of eating cancer out of her. It is this whole, I suppose we don't know how bad Scully is for this, other than it's causing bleeding now.
Which presumably means if it's showing symptoms is her cancer's progressing.
Indeed. Is not good.
And is in her head, which is generally not good as well.
Yes.
You've skipped over the amazing ending of this, which is something I've been complaining every other episode for, is that Scully needs to be rescued. Is Scully kicks ass.
She does.
At long flipping last, we've remembered that she's a brown belt in karate.
Yep.
Scully absolutely kicks his ass and kills him.
Yep.
with a defibrillator pedal at the end.
And would you like to get into the problems with that?
Yes, and I will go that I was schooled about this online, is technically speaking, I have mentioned before, I am a first aider at my place of work. I have a defibrillator and I know how to use it. Is a normal defibrillator, as you normally see them, and I believe that Breaking Bad flubbed up on this as well, cannot kill a person. It absolutely cannot. For one thing, that when you put it on a person, it scans and sees if they need to have a shock and will not activate if they don't. And two, even if you gave someone a shock and say you were touching the body, is they're slow, low voltage that they might make you feel nauseous, but they can't kill you. I guess unless you had some severe cardiac problem that it might exacerbate. Apparently, because this is where I was schooled online, there are fail-safes on a professional defibrillator that a medical professional would use, that if you turn them off, could fatally shock someone. I will buy the fact that I don't think Scully had enough time to kind of turn off all these fail-safes and fully charge the panels in the scene. But let's say she could, that would have been enough to kill a person.
Okay.
My problem is, he's on top of her when she uses them.
So all that electricity runs right through him, into her.
Right through him, down into her.
And into the car tyres.
Yep.
Ambulance tyres, even.
So you will go with even, let's say, likely it would ground in the tyres anyway and no one would get hurt. If it didn't, you've killed Scully too.
Yep. Oh dear. Come on, guys. Not John Shaban so much, but the other two are meant to be better than this.
So yeah, for everyone who schooled me online, I found another problem with that defibrillator. Sorry, I had to watch the scene a few times to come up with a good argument against it. I knew it bothered me, but there we are. I do think as well, it's whenever you see doctors using them in medical dramas, they say charging, which infers the fact that it's not quick.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's usually, it's the whole clear. You can also throw Scream 5 onto the pile of things that did it wrong, because I'm pretty sure Scream 4, because I'm pretty sure she kills her cousin with the defibrillator at the end.
That is another medical one, though.
It is, but again,
I say medical, I mean like one a hospital would use.
But she's not going to know how to turn the failsafes off. I don't believe Sidney Prescott has this information.
Yeah.
She could, but she's been writing books for a while. I don't think she's that knowledgeable. Moving back to Leonard Betts itself.
But again, yeah, I'm really happy that Scully kicked ass, despite the fact she just had this shocking cancer diagnosis from Leonard Betts. She kicked ass and she saved herself before Mulder ran onto the scene for flipping once.
Yep, that's good. Well, and I was saying also she's in the action scene for change. It's not Mulder's got to go off and got to go and do the cool thing. Scully gets to do it.
Which is one of the reasons I really like this episode. And the fact that it's another procedural one is we follow our clues throughout it, which lead us to the end.
Yes.
Which, as I've said since DPO, is I think that's the best structure for an X-Files episode.
Yeah, and it's things like finding Leonard's alternate name and his mother and everything.
Which we've done correctly by running his fingerprints and stuff like that.
We still have that slight one of, while it is possible to get another identity, it's not necessarily straightforward, and he's got to have done this again for the third hospital, at least 3 times, you are sort of stacking failure rates at that point.
Yeah, I can't remember what his new identity is called. It's something like Loveday.
Yeah.
He's going by now. So that's Albert Tanner, Leonard Betts, and somebody Loveday.
And while it's
True Love, sorry.
Okay.
That was it. True Love.
While it's a plausible coincidence thing, it's as much as he might like the work, you might think moving to a different city would be a better plan than just going to a different hospital or working in an ambulance and on the radio where your former partner can hear you.
I presume you need training to be an EMT too, so he's evidently got to evidence he's got this experience.
We're coming back to that
without mentioning the fact that he's faked his death twice.
Yeah, so we're going back to that problem that Sanguinarium had of how are you doing this?
And Tombs.
You can't just assume a new identity and have qualifications, because, I mean, admittedly to a point, if you're a chancer, you can get away with it, because it turns out that if you say you have certain qualifications, it depends very much on who you're talking to, but in certain circumstances, they won't do the background check. They'll just take it as read if what you've told them is true. It is, however, a risk, and given Leonard Betts' situation and the fact that he needs access to cancerous material to survive, as far as we can tell, you think you'd be a lot more careful about doing this.
Yeah.
Because if you get turned down, you basically have to start breaking into hospitals or just hang around cancer wards or these like the Fight Club help groups and guided meditation lot, and then just start vampiring on them or something.
Yeah, it mentions in the episode that he reads to cancer patients or something.
Yeah.
Which is presumably giving him his access to the cancer ward so he can slip in and get his excised organs.
Yeah, and we want to believe at least he's doing this as non-fatal as he can, but it's when his hand's been pushed in this episode why he's killing people.
He's kind of lost his access to the hospital, basically. Yeah. I think it infers from those kind of storage bags he's got in his boots and things that he's taking these out of the trash, basically. Because we've seen that medical incinerator in the basement.
We would have to speculate a bit on exactly how much does he need to consume, given he's literally just eaten his mother's cancerous material.
He's doing a lot of regenerating in this episode, though. Presumably he's normally not regenerating entire limbs and bodies and stuff like that. Maybe it's purely because he needs that extra boost.
Yeah, it's just the speed with which he has to go for Scully feels a bit...
I like the feel with Leonard Betts, though, unlike the likes of Too Shy and Tombs and the monster vampire things we've seen in the X-Files so far, is Leonard's apologetic. He seems a lot higher functioning, a lot more human and more articulate.
Yeah, I was going to say, he feels like human first, monster second, whereas the other ones were monster first, human second.
Yeah, he's not predatory at all, and it's always suffused with the "I'm sorry, but you have something I need" line.
Yeah.
And he does genuinely sound sorry as well.
He does. Yeah, he's quite sympathetic. It's just a shame that basically...
It's the cool motive still murder.
Yeah, basically, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And I think as well, to also link back somewhat weirdly to Tunguska, it's the sense of you can have your perfect setup as much as you like. You can't take into account every other factor in the world. So you can't take into account that your partner is a bit of a stupid person when she's driving an ambulance. Like, you should be facing forward and getting to the hospital, not seeing what Leonard's doing in the back.
I saw that as a criticism of the episode, actually, and it's a fair point when I was reading trivia this time, is the fact that at the start of the episode, when Leonard diagnoses that guy's cancer, she's stunned, she looks away and says, "That's amazing." But later, when she talks to Mulder, she comments on the fact that he did this a lot.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't have come as a surprise to her.
That's a good one, too. I think you've got two things being served by the writing there. You need the sting, but then you also need to do backstory for Leonard, and she's the person to do it with. Mm. And as you said, yeah, that shouldn't have been it. You needed something else to happen.
I guess it's easy as it just becomes a normal conversation, and I'm rewriting the episode again, where she's saying, "Wow, Leonard, you always do that, that's amazing," and the truck blindsides them.
Yeah.
And it's not her fault.
Yes, it's just someone has run a light or something.
Yeah.
Again, yeah, it's a weird problem they've got there. Kind of trivial one, because on the whole, yes, the episode is very good.
It's an interesting superpower for Leonard as well, I must admit, is, yep, fair enough, we'll buy the whole he needs to eat cancerous organs to regenerate his own cells, which are all cancerous.
Yeah, he is just cancer.
Because he is just cancer. But also giving him the kind of power to recognise if people have cancer. It's a good adaptation for a predator that needs this.
Yep. Although, do you want to get into, hey, iodine isn't that colour?
Hey, iodine isn't that colour. Yeah, we've seen that he's using is, can't remember what that kind of iodine he uses is called. That, interestingly, is carcinogenic, which I thought was quite interesting for the episode, is that type of iodine used to be marketed as having, great healing, restorative properties, which is as it's portrayed in this episode, but also later studies showed that it could have cancer-producing carcinogenic effects on people, which I thought made it a good choice for Leonard Betts, to be honest.
Yeah, although you then have to say is, would that do anything to him? Because if all his cells are cancer, then can be cancerous cancer?
They do mention in the episode the fact that it aids regeneration in reptiles and stuff, which I thought actually was a nice hark back, because Mulder mentions something about how...
Salamanders.
Yep. As you are aware, he says about the salamanders, which harks back to Young at Heart.
Yeah, although I have a horrible feeling they're doing that for the real world salamander thing, and they've forgotten that episode happened.
Yeah.
Because most people try to forget that episode happened.
But anyway, iodine itself is kind of like this very pale brownish colour, so you do see as a medical treatment iodine baths, and if you Google pictures of it, you'll see the image I'm talking about. is that it's kind of this murky brown colour and it's not opaque. So Mulder would have looked into that bath and just seen the naked man lying there, and it would have been a very short episode.
And the ratings have gone way up. The other thing that made me think of, though, was Sanguinarium again, with people can hold their breath in films and TV as long as they need to.
Leonard is a monster. It's less believable, I think, in Sanguinarium when it's just some woman.
That's true, but he still needs to breathe, presumably, and he's just... And it's all the ability to sense when someone's walked out of the room before you break surface and everything. Is they always do this. Not sure how you do this. Okay, anything in the bath like that.
Especially when you're into something like iodine that must be stinging your eyes, something rotten.
And your skin and everything, any little cut.
Iodine burns when you get it into cuts as well.
Given he's regrown his head, that must be like raw and everything. And, also, Leonard has a really long bath, because I don't know about me, particularly in a bath like that, my legs be sticking up out of it.
I think he's pretty big as well.
Yeah.
Even if he was short like me, you'd have a problem lying full length in that bathtub.
So he's got an enormous bath there.
So we're buying on the fact that he would only have about a centimetre of this iodine over the top of him in this by the time he crammed himself in.
Leonard, you're under arrest. Oh, holy shit, that's Leonard. He's really grown his entire head. Do you have anything else for this episode?
It was really nice to see Chuck back.
Oh, yeah, I actually forgot to mention Chuck. It's nice to see Chuck back, and actually as Chuck this time, and not random doctor in a town full of cockroaches.
He was Chuck back in Kalashari too.
He was. No, but his appearance after that, though, was in Copperphages. Where he wasn't
forgot
Chuck.
He was in Coryphage. Yeah, where he wasn't Chuck again for some reason.
Yeah, he wasn't wearing his glasses, so then he wasn't Chuck, and he got them back, so he is one of the weirdest X-Files recasts. Given he was also in Jersey Devil, wasn't he? As the dad.
Yeah, he was the dad in the flashback in that.
But the aura thing is... Chuck was kind of into weird stuff in Kalashari, but not quite like this. Because he was enhancing photos in Kalashari, wasn't he? This is aura photography, which is one of those whole they're very pretty, they feel meaningful, but I don't think anyone's sure of the science on them.
It's very new age science sort of thing.
Yeah, and
they're really interesting.
Oh, they're really interesting, and it's really odd to see it. Also, the extrapolation thing of, would you believe if I told you this was a decapitated body? Like, you can see a fair outline of what might be shoulders, but not meaningfully. I mean, if you had a full length thing where you could see the whole outline of his body, that would be good. It's just kind of the vague outline of head and shoulders, isn't it? It's not, I don't feel it's as meaningful as Mulder thinks it is.
I imagine it's the fact that it's such a vibrant image and the fact that he's been long dead.
Yeah.
Is you wouldn't expect it to have a strong aura like that.
Well, I imagine that's what he's getting at, but then you're still getting into very, very, as you said, very new age, this is very pseudoscience-y stuff. I thought Chuck was better than this, to be honest. At least that's the impression I got.
What Chuck? Chuck from Kalashari was a bit of a hippie.
He was. But again, he was just enhancing photos to see what was there, wasn't he? It wasn't like this. Because he could see like the hazy outline of the figure pulling the balloon along.
So Chuck's gone down in your estimations, but he's gone way up in mine.
A bit. I mean, I like him as a character. I mean, it's fun to see him again.
He's so positive.
He's positive, and we know he will actually reprise the role a few more times.
Yes, he does, I think.
Not sure quite how many more, but he will be back.
We also got another cameo from John Gilnitz.
Oh yes, he died, didn't he?
He's the trucker who had a lung that Leonard Betts needed.
Ah, okay.
In the bar. But they say it when it comes to autopsy that it's the body of one John Gilnitz. Which again, I think we saw him in Wet Wired last. It's the reoccurring joke character who often dies, whose name is a portmanteau of Frank Spotnitz, John Shaban, and Vince Gilligan, I think.
Oh, 3 writers on this episode, in fact.
So there we are, second appearance of John Gilnitz today. I don't really have that much to add to this episode, but I just like it. It's well structured, it's fast paced, and I like it gets a really good balance between having some kind of darkly comical moments, a quite creepy plot, and some very sad moments too. I mean, Leonard sacrificing his poor partner and things like that is actually really heartbreaking.
And his mother, although his mother is all for it, and does survive. She was interesting in the book as well, as they put a bit more into her head, which I thought was interesting.
And it's particularly that scene where she convinces Leonard to cut out her cancer. It kind of heavily weighs into the fact that she was scared about it but couldn't let it show because she knew that if she seemed nervous, Leonard would refuse to do it.
Oh, okay.
Which I thought humanised both of them quite a lot in there.
Yeah.
Is she knew she wanted to do what was best for her son and was aware that he loved her and would be reluctant to do so. Which again shows that Leonard isn't really a monster.
No, he's someone who basically he's being forced into bad situations by external factors that have disrupted how he intended to live his life.
It's as Elaine Tanner says earlier in the episode, is the fact that if he kills somebody, it'll be for a reason. And largely it is. You can't excuse the killing, but it's when he can't get the cancerous organs he needs by any other means.
Yeah.
That's what forces him to kill.
Well, yeah, you are going to hold the matter of survival of... You can't really just let yourself starve to death. On the other hand, you are killing... not healthy people, but people. Although some of them, like his mother, he was very careful with extracting things in a way that wouldn't ultimately kill her.
I thought that was nice when you saw it, the fact that he put a compression bandage on her and immediately called an ambulance.
Yeah.
So he gave her as much as he could, and it ultimately sounded like she was going to survive.
Yeah. He, however, would not.
Or so we think.
No,
as far as you can be sure, Leonard Betts is dead.
Well, given, in terms of TV episodes, he's not coming back. In terms of, they could have done a sequel in the comics, but I'm pretty sure they don't do that.
No, there isn't a Leonard Betts sequel.
So, while we could claim this episode as part of the conspiracy, I will give you until next week, because one of next week's episodes is Memento Mori.
Oh, is it?
Which is definitely a conspiracy episode and definitely ties back into the cancer and everything else. So
yeah, I think at this stage, all we can say is Scully potentially has cancer. There's nothing really to link to the conspiracy yet.
Yeah, except that this was foreshadowed way back in season 3.
We did note that women with the implants did seem to be dying of cancer an awful lot.
Yes, especially after they took them out.
Which Scully has also done.
Also next week, though, is Never Again. Infamous episode, shall we say.
Yeah, I'm curious what the fan base thinks of Never Again. I might put that to Twitter shortly.
In the meantime, if you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
You can also get us over on social media. On Tumblr and Twitter, we are at GetStrange42. On Mastodon, we are at GetStrange42@universedon.com. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast. Also, do keep an eye out for my Twitch streaming. Currently doing Mortal Shell. It's Mondays and Wednesdays, 9 PM British summertime. Over on Twitch, my username is Dire Not Dire.
We have Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where we are going to redo our Let's Play of the first X-Files game to try and speed up this whole process. But if you want to sign up, the episode 1 is still there with our hopefully hilarious commentary.
Hilarious. There are 3 tiers to our Patreon at various different prices. Just so you're aware, there are different perks in every tier, but if you back us at any level, you will have access to the Let's Play and any other special things we have planned.
We will get around to the other video game, the comics, the books, maybe the trading cards if we're feeling really, really overzealous. I'm pretty... There are trading cards, aren't there?
There is a trading card game, in fact.
There's a trading card game. We could... No, we're not going to do a Let's Play of the trading card game. Audio only. Which turn to Yugo. I play Mulder. This gives me paranoia plus 50.
You just activated my trap card.
Are you telling me that the cigarette smoker wants a Brooklyn accent, or are you playing First Elder for this?
I think I'll be playing the First Elder deck on that basis. Except I'd have to do a more Orson Wellesy voice for that.
Yeah. I have a horrible feeling the actual game not going to be anywhere near as fun as that.
No trap cards?
Sadly not. But we will investigate. We'll find out. That sounds like something to look into as well. And at some point, we all get into the unmade scripts, given if we can get hold of them. But we definitely have hold of Flight 180, otherwise known as the thing that would be Final Destination after a lot of reworking. But anyway, our theme music is envisioned by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next week, please remember,
you've got something I need.